In the darkest worlds that ever were, the only thing that brings light are stories. Those stories are kept in one place, the tiny bookcase. Hello, story seekers. I'm Nico.
I'm Ben, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Welcome to the final of 4 special episodes that make up our Nano season.
In these episodes, we've discussed our progress through NaNoWriMo 2021, had a couple of authors on to talk about their nano experiences, and ultimately we've also workshopped some snippets of our works in progress.
Been a departure from the normal format, but we've really enjoyed having you all along for this experience.
It's been a really strange one.
It's a funny old thing, isn't it? This writing to a word count.
Yeah.
We do it all
Yeah.
the time.
No, I think it is, and also just generally for the Tiny Bookcase, we're called the Tiny Bookcase, and we've been doing some big ass stories and talking
Yeah.
about big ass stories for a month now. We're 4 episodes into this now, and that's after a year or so of exclusively short stories, like bordering on flash fiction. Some of them.
Have you worried about your ability to go back to writing Flash after this?
Um,
Because I legitimately have.
Possibly, yeah. Not in like not in like a meaningful way, but in a
Yeah.
sort of like a sort of animal anxiety kind of way.
That's going to be a reset type thing. Yeah.
I think so, but I'm not too worried about it. I think it's something that we've both been doing for a really long time and both enjoy doing, so
Yeah.
it's not really a problem. But we definitely had to change gear in order to start this process of writing a novel, and we've got there, really, haven't we?
Well, yeah. There are 50,000 elephants in this room
100,000 if you can include both of us.
as a pair. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So I guess we could just say it at this stage, but we have both completed NaNoWriMo. Early.
It's the 28th today.
It's the 28th today.
As we record. If you're listening to this on launch day, you've got a couple of days left, so you can make it. Believe in yourself. But we're done. We got there. It's very
we both
strange.
finished on the 24th of November. After it's got to be said, becoming quite competitive about the word count.
Oh god, yeah.
I think because we were also doing it, with this companion series that we've been doing for the Tiny Bookcase, we were very aware that if one of us fell short, it would be very public.
We'll be flogged in the public square for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I happen to know that whilst I was out the night before we finished, Nico took the opportunity to steal a march on me and wrote like 5,000 words.
5,500, thanks.
5,500. So I was comfortably in air quotes lead, and then it turned into a straight sprint on the 24th of November, and we both finished.
There we were.
Excellent, yeah.
It's I immediately did the thing of, but the story's not done, so I'll keep writing, and I've not written a single word since I beat that word count, which is awful.
Really?
Yeah, I want to, but I think it's that I've been busy, and instead of previously being busy and forcing myself to sit down and write some words, I've just allowed myself to be busy and become lax with it. So
yeah, I mean, we should probably talk about that when we get around to getting to the nitty gritty of the NaNoWriMo so
yeah.
far. But I've definitely got some bits and pieces about that because I've felt similarly, if not done exactly the same.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of things you've done, young Benjamin,
Yes.
we dug into my story last week, and I think it's your turn.
I feel you like strapping me over a barrel or something here just to roll me downhill.
No, what's actually going to happen here, Ben, is you're going to read a lovely bit of story, and then you're going to critique how I make editing notes. That's what's going to happen here.
I'm so at it. Bloody hell! Right, okay. I'll give you some words, and we'll go from there. Here's a story. So for everybody listening, this is from the point of view of Leora in My Work in Progress. We met her, I think we saw her opening, what's possibly going to be her opening chapter in one of these NaNoWriMo episodes. This is a bit later on, and she is in a difficult political situation where her background has drawn her into the upper criminal echelon that rules the city of the Gore. Anyway, here we go. The grand hall of the Medi residence shone with the light of 1,000 candles. Some had been thrust up towards the painted ceiling and held in place by a glittering chandelier that spun crystal refractions about the room. Still more were atop the high tables in fine silver holders. In the centre of the room, a wide stretch of polished floor had been left empty of furniture. Spinning and whirling across it with grace and skill, the guests were dancing. Leora had never seen anything like it. The kind of dancing she and Case had done was in the leaky-roofed taverns near the Turner district. Big kicks, stomps, and laughter had rung out with raucous abandon as the fiddle players lifted their hearts and a man with a drum kept time. What she now saw was very different indeed. The people before her all seemed to know the same dance and matched it to the complex song that the 24 musicians were skillfully navigating. The instruments astounded Leora too. Some bore similarities to the ones she had seen, but others were beyond her understanding. Large string instruments that looked to her like fiddles the size of a small man gave out deep tones. One man sat upon a stool whilst his fingers darted across a board of fine white keys at the front of a monstrous wooden body that looked like a table with a lid. She sipped the wine she held in a fine crystal flute. It sparkled over her tongue and flooded her mouth with flavour. There was still a damp spot on the front of her dress from where she'd taken her first mouthful without knowing what the stuff was like. She was sure the spluttering faux pas had ruined the work of Hexa's servants, those 2 men that had taken such care to apply powders and paints to her face in the hours before the party. She smiled regardless, feeling the warmth of the wine in her chest. As she took a breath, she became doubly aware of how tight the corset beneath the dress had been cinched. Leora preferred clothes she could move quickly and work comfortably in. Pushing in an ungainly fashion through the dancers, Leora could see there was a man storming in her direction. He was wide and tall, with a flush to his cheeks that told her he was already drunk. His bright blue long coat was unbuttoned over a cream shirt, which was festooned with lace accents. It had perhaps once looked very fine on him, before he became sloppily inebriated. The man stomped close to her, far too close, and leered at her before grabbing her chin. "Whose did you slither out of, you usurping little bitch? Is it true you're Olsen's rape child?" Spittle flew from his mouth, and some of it spattered into her open eyes and mouth. She could taste the strong liquor the man had been imbibing. His hand was clamped hard on her chin, causing her to hear her jaw creak inside her head. "Yes," she forced out through gritted teeth. "Well, fuck that!" She realised he was fumbling in his belt and drew out a dagger as long as his forearm. He placed the tip against the soft flesh of her neck. "And fuck you!" She saw him tense to plunge it into her neck. "Delin!" barked the unmistakable voice of Hexa Medi. The people around them froze and the man paused. Out of the corner of her eye, Leora saw Hexa wobble towards them with the use of a cane. The large bodyguard who went with her, seemingly everywhere, was with her. His clothes were again made of the same fabric as her dress, and he would have looked quite comical were it not for his imposing stature and ferocious scowl. "If you harm her, I'll have your daughters drowned and your sons sold to brothels in Iska." "Those are your grandchildren!" "So is she. She that you fool." Leora recognised the name. Delin Medi was Hexa's 3rd son, master of the shipyards and docks that crowded the Gore's northern shore. By all accounts, he was one of the most powerful men in the city. Leora felt a strong revulsion that a sloppily violent drunk like him was milking those hard workers. At Hexy's words, the man had begun to shrink back. The point of the blade that oppressed the flesh of her neck was withdrawn, and he sheathed the steel. His blotchy red face seemed to be ready to hiss steam, but instead of speaking, he turned on his heel and marched back through the elegant dancers to rejoin his drinking cronies. "Delin is a lesser-minded fool, unfortunately," said Hexa. "His schemes and plots are as transparent as they are ineffective. Now I have been considering the way in which you siphoned your power from your mother as she slept. My understanding was that the Turners were required to exert their personal will in order to deposit power through those electrum cogs and conduits. How then did your plan work? The cog turners, especially those that have been turning for many years, like my mother, lose the ability to control it, and their will is almost entirely eroded by the constant drain. They are magically incontinent. One sympathizes. Hexa smiled to herself and sipped at the flute of fizzing wine she carried. Then I think we have the beginnings of a plan. I will find a way to put them in the Turners' billets, so that when they sleep we can siphon and begin stockpiling our own power. Have you seen the machinery that can be driven by it? Gone are the days of majors throwing fireballs at crumbling ramparts. The Gore will be the centre of industry for anything the tinkerers I employ can set the power to, and none of it will breach our agreement with the Tower to keep the volume of the Turners high in the sheds. I did not intend for that. If you do it too much, their situations will worsen rapidly. Do you know that for a fact? Yes. It's clear from their shifts that every day takes time and thought from them in disproportionate amounts. Unfortunately, my dear Lyora, it is the way of the world that the big fish eat the little fish. You're an exceptional girl. I had always thought one of my sons would do well to replace me, but now I see I needed someone who has known hardship as I did. Someone who sees new solutions for old problems, as I did. Someone who doesn't think with their rod, as they all seem to have done. Men are corrupted by power all too easily. Come, let me announce you to the room. Hexy's manservant, clearly sensing her hesitate, gripped Leora by the elbow and steered her to follow the matriarch. As a trio, they swept across the open dance floor. The dancers bowed and scraped their deference to Hexy as they got out of the way of her clattering stick. When the old woman reached the platform on which the musicians were performing, she poked the conductor in his backside, causing him to yell out in surprise at the sudden rear invasion. Hexa hissed her words at him. Tell them to shut up, or I'll prod you so hard I'll get shit on my stick. The man quickly quietened the small orchestra with frantic waves and hissed instructions. The music, so beautiful moments ago, collapsed into silence. Hexa began speaking so loudly and insistently that the men and women in the room were forced to halt their private conversations and listen. People of the Gore, Medi Associates, and other assorted posh people, you all know me. Some of you fear me. One thing is certain, my family rules this city. I am old and soon to die, so the issue of succession must be raised. Who can I choose to carry on our governorship of the city and to carry out our deal with the Tower? At this, she nodded to a short man at the front of the crowd. Leora saw him for the first time and realized that he was staring intently at her. The look gave her the impression that he thought of her as an insect he desired to dissect. I have many sons, and they in turn have sons. Some of them are competent, but none are worthy of my position despite my best efforts. They are debauched and overindulged rapists with minimal practical skills for the most part. And so, with my granddaughter Leora returned to me, herself the daughter of Olsen, who was my firstborn, I choose her, and seal it with a decree that she is to be obeyed in all things upon my timely death. She allowed the already long pause to stretch painfully. The hundreds of people that occupied the room seemed to be either struck dumb or waiting for the other shoe to fall on their heads. Right, that's it. Drink and dance, then fuck off. With that, Hexa turned to look at Leora. The smile she wore was not kind.
First of all, what a scene.
You like it?
Oh man, it does two things very, very well. Obviously, it sets up a big story beat with Leora being named as successor. But also, it paints an excellent picture of how the upper half live in your world. Because going in, we don't know if they have champagne and pianos and it'd be ballroom dancing, but this sets it all in stone. And that's a really important thing.
It provides an interesting counterpoint to the the grim, rainy cobbles that we saw earlier, perhaps.
Yeah, I definitely helped having seen Leora in that sequence previously and having a bit of background on her as well. It's structurally, I have pretty much nothing to say. You are a lot better at putting together normal sentences than I am. But there's some interesting character stuff that I picked up on.
Okay.
I absolutely fucking love Hexa, by the way.
She's fun.
She is phenomenal. Was her calling the various penises of her sons rods specifically chosen because of the Electrum rod?
Yeah, so that's sort of trying to build a bit of colloquial
Okay.
euphemism.
It's only because she's shown to be quite crass everywhere else,
True.
and that one stood out because of it. So I thought it might be a specific reference to that, because she seems like she then goes on to say, I'll poke you so hard that I end up with shit on my stick.
She's not very euphemistic, is she, anywhere else? Yeah, I think that's a good bit of feedback. I think that's me trying to do something that the character wouldn't do.
Yeah, I think you're too clever for that character.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think she is.
She's very sharp, but I don't think she's eloquent in that way.
She's definitely not eloquent
Yeah.
and sees no point in euphemism, and none of them do. Like, one of the things that Delyn is extremely foul-mouthed.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to put in that, like, although they are like the elite, the other half, as you put it earlier, they are still all like criminal bastards.
Yes.
So they all spend a lot of time in a completely, like, being like, not swearing is not a sign of being lower in this society.
Yeah.
Which happily works for me because I love swearing. So
That's interestingly, we'll have more of a chat about it because it's something I've really struggled with in trying to reduce how much I swear in my writing. Or at least cap off what level of swear words I feel are acceptable.
I think, in people's conversations, like in a character's voice, if they would swear, it's entirely reasonable to swear. I try not to put any in my actual prose.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a bit of a strange one where it's sort of, like third person limited, you sort of hear a little bit of what's happening inside someone's head, maybe.
Yeah.
But outside of quotation marks, I keep it fairly low, I think.
Saying things like, it was really fucking raining.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have the interesting thing where your one of your narrators is basically a character, so
yes,
that would sort of work if it was inside that, like, formatted space. But I think people, maybe it's just me, but, like, I definitely would be like, what if I saw too much swearing in narrator setup?
Yes. I think it's the big part is just working out what level you're comfortable with as well. Like, what is your readership going to be all right with? For example, the sphere yours is sort of set in and aimed at. I think you can pretty much say anything.
And I do.
I noticed.
Delyn's little outburst is really extreme, as are his actions.
Yeah, that's a complicated family tree, isn't it? I'm getting that impression.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether that would come across, but yeah, there's a brood of them for sure.
Yeah, many sons with many sons, I'm feeling.
Yes.
The actually still on Hexa, because what a woman. The line about being magically incontinent, I sympathise. What a turn of phrase, Ben.
Yeah.
What a fantastic little, because it's so evocative. It's so nice, but then it pulls in that she is an old woman, and she's feeling the pressures of being an old woman.
Yeah.
And that then ties into my timely demise. Her saying, "I will go when I'm ready to go." Like, she's old and she feels the pressures and the pains of being old, but she's also like, she's not just given up. Really works for the character.
I'm glad. She is. She was where I felt Leora's storyline started to come together.
Okay.
because all of a sudden I had this just matriarchal figure in my head
Yeah.
um, that was undeniable. Like Hexa is just. I mean, she rules a city and she's the head of a criminal family and all the rest of it. But the way that she just sort of like barks at people and gets things done and is like just absolutely like a force of nature
Yeah.
is really heavily modelled on my own grandmother. And I've also like physically based her off my grandmother as well.
Yeah.
So it's been quite interesting writing it. I found her quite cathartic because it's sort of like dealing with an unfettered low fantasy version of my grandmother, who I mean, yeah, which considering she died about 5 or 6 years ago now. It was yeah, it's been quite interesting digging into it.
Oh, our nanotherapy season is well underway, isn't it?
Quite possibly, but I think you've got to put stuff into your writing, otherwise it feels a bit hollow. Um, and at least for me, it does. And I was definitely drawing on that with her, and I think it's worked. Like Hexa does jump off the page a bit. Um, there are obviously other scenes in the book that similarly, um, she similarly sort of dominates.
Yeah.
But yes, I appreciate that you liked her, and that
Hey,
turn of phrase is fun. I'm
it's
enjoying writing
grand.
it.
It is grand. Um, a weird language one.
Yep.
The description of the orchestra is really very cool
Okay. Yeah.
because of the what the hell does that instrument do?
Yeah.
But it's the use of the term keys when she's looking at a piano for the
Yeah.
first
Sure.
time.
Okay.
Great for context for the reader,
Mm.
but be careful of knowing that name. A really common thing like used by people who don't really know pianos was used to be teeth. They described them as having teeth. It was, I think it's Pidgin English, where the word for piano is unbelievably long, and it's old man sitting corner. You hit him white teeth, he sing. You hit him black teeth, he cry.
Okay. Fine white teeth. Yeah. That could work.
But you don't necessarily have to use that word. But
No, something
it was
like
just
that.
a thing that stuck. Where I thought, oh, she said, oh, is this so far into Leora's perspective that word doesn't sit right, or are we just comfortably with the narrator and therefore it's fine, and I'm just overthinking it because I have to make notes about this
No, I think
piece that I'm reading?
that paragraph, it deliberately tries to I don't know whether this is a word, but like alienize something that the reader knows. So
Yes.
it makes sense to try and it's cheating a little bit and to shortcut it and say keys, I think. Yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate that. Yes, I have
Beyond
the
that, don't go on.
so I have the problem with this piece that
Okay.
I feel like it expands into larger stuff in the rest of the book, in that
Okay.
it feels like it bounces along too quickly.
A lot
Like,
happens in a short space.
yeah, and somehow I feel like it's overwritten and underwritten at the same time. Um,
It could work to break the sequence up. So if you had Leora be a bit overwhelmed, for example, by what's happening in that room, and she just goes somewhere else, and she doesn't know that they have separate privies for men and women in this kind of place or whatever, and
yeah,
that's how she comes
mm,
across this absolute asshole of an uncle.
yeah. Leave the space somehow. The only problem is immediately after this, she does then leave the space.
Okay.
Um, so but again, that's for more more story. It's like story beat, story beat, story beat, just rattling through is what it feels like when I'm editing. It feels very
Yeah.
quick. But I don't know whether that's something that when people are actually just reading on a page, whether it wouldn't feel like that because it's
It
obviously
it
slower.
it felt intense. I wouldn't
Mm,
say it felt too fast, and neither of the major story beats that happen here are unnecessary.
okay.
So
Mm,
you get that it's very quick him pulling the dagger on her, but that does paint the picture of this man is unhinged, and that means that likely all of the other uncles are as well. And then you have that there for when Hexa says, my sons are all rapists and unreasonable. You think, oh no, Leora's in a terrible position.
She really is.
Yeah.
Being, it's one of the things that I like about this is it's hinted at. Well, it's not hinted at. It's very clear that it's basically the classic like, see, you're the heir storyline. Look at all this stuff that you've inherited. You're going to be rich. Fantasy fulfillment. But actually, she just leapfrogged a bunch of dudes who do those kind of horrible acts for fun.
Yeah.
Which this is still very early on in the book. This is the 4th time we see Leora in the book. Her story does go places after this.
It keeps coming back to my girl Hexa. But the threat of I'll have your daughters drowned and your sons sold to a brothel in Isca. That's it. It didn't feel hollow when she said it, and she'd only been on the page for moments.
Yeah,
and that's strong stuff. But the reason that came back to my mind was thinking about that. The point counterpoint of those are your grandchildren. So she.
Yeah.
Because that's just a brilliant way to cement the situation. This scene does a lot of setup, and it does do it quickly. It does it at a pace, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Okay, well that allays some of my fears about it, because I feel like I do this quite a lot in this book.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of story in it for the length that it currently is. Like the book as a whole is about 110,000 words at the moment. It's a full first draft. And that's about 270 paperback pages or something. But it feels like it could do with being the same amount of story, but just stretched out a little in places, which might happen during the edit. But at the same time, I don't want to bloat it. Like, perhaps people like the fact that it just moves along.
When are you getting your train driver's cap, Ben?
I don't think I'll ever graduate to train driver's cap, really. Like, I think Game of Thrones is, 300,000 words? The first one?
Something ludicrous, yeah.
Which is just insane. I don't think that's saleable,
How many words is it if you take out every instance of a Lannister always pays their debts?
No, the thing that you would take out if you wanted to cut the word count down is the food descriptions.
I mean, yeah.
That'd be you could slice 100,000 words off that book quite easily.
I feel like everyone has a thing that is that, right?
Yeah.
So for Gurm, it's food, and for Tolkien, it's plants.
Yeah, he does love.
Where they love to talk about them, and I'm wondering what my thing is going to be. Yours is clearly people's genitals either being removed or described.
Well, that's the other thing they say about Gurm. He's got a weird fascination with people's nipples, both male and female, and horrible things happening to them.
Yeah.
There are like 4 or 5 instances in the first book of something bad happening in that regard. And I think we have jokes about it before, but there are at least 3 geldings in this book, which is a lot of geldings. I don't know what the normal sort of quota for geldings is for a low fantasy book, but here we are. The other thing that's going on inside this section, just before we jump away from it, is this sort of setup for how the magical power is being used for the punk side of things.
Yes.
Because what I'm attempting to do here, yes, it is low fantasy, but I'm trying to write something that I've called magic punk, which is the fundamentals there are that so magic exists in the setting, and it also is the central power source for all for everything, including secular power and machinery. That's what the whole book turns on. And the punk aspect there is also raging against that authority and being counter to the hegemony of
Yeah.
sorry, counter to the supremacy of those that control that power. Um, so I'm really enjoying writing that, but at the same time, sometimes like in this scene, it feels like it's almost separate from the story that I'm writing elsewhere. So when they have that little bit about talking about how she's going to use the power, it feels a little bit exposition-y. Um, so possibly that needs to be sort of layered through a little bit more.
I think it can be allowed. It's a good point. Like if you take it like this world, it's kind of like people with oil money being somewhere, and one of them saying to their granddaughter, "Well, the thing is, now that you've figured out that when we refine oil, the stuff you scrape off the top can be turned into X,
Mm.
I'm gonna do this with it."
Yeah.
And that shit happens. Not that we've ever been invited to those kind of parties, but
I was going to ask you. We need to find out more about these parties.
well, I'm a Southern boy and I don't know much about that. But well, we do things a little different than you do up there in the big city.
Yeah, it's very much like that. And we saw in the first bit with Leora that I read out on this that she invented something in order to try and get her family out of this kind of poverty and also exploitation of being a cog turner.
Yes.
And in this, it's very clear that that is about to be weaponized to extort, to force more like damage on that echelon of society.
Yes.
Which, yeah, as you can see, that this is where all the sort of like the punk elements are coming in. So yeah, hopefully it works. But I think that's some really good feedback. I will work on those kind of things with just making sure I don't do things that are for me as the writer. I
think that's a really interesting way of putting it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you I feel like most of the stuff that you were saying there was me compromising a character or a description in order to achieve something else that I wanted to do. So I think if I'm a bit more conscious about that, hopefully that will be good for the editing brain that I'll be switching on.
You can hit me back with that stick at some point, I'm sure.
That was really useful. Thank you for the feedback. But yeah, so we've spoken about it a bit. Like, you know, I've said my word count and page count and all the rest of it. But we have done this. We've finished NaNoWriMo, this
Yes.
this challenge of writing 50,000 words in 1 month. How you feeling?
Don't know. Like I haven't actually written loads of words, and it's gonna sound weird. Like I haven't earned it.
Really?
Yeah. Like the way we started doing it made it so easy for me to get myself in the right headspace and actually put words down. I feel like I've cheated. But that's probably going to come back and absolutely annihilate me when I attempt to edit this thing.
But who have you cheated? Like who?
I don't know.
Because I mean, this is you know, all for us going on about our competition and stuff. You win NaNoWriMo for yourself just by completing the word count inside the given time, which you've undeniably done. So you haven't cheated anything or anyone. You've achieved it.
Yeah.
So is that because it feels empty to you?
I don't know. I think it might be maybe some residual burnout.
Right.
So now that I've stopped sort of aggressively writing, it's sort of like, oh, fuck, where am I? Where did this? Because I'm on 61.5K in total for mine, and I sort of vaguely aware I still want to put 10,000 words down before I even start editing, and it's I don't know. Maybe it's the sense that I did the thing, but I haven't actually finished. I think that might be what it is that's striking that chord.
I can get behind that. When I did NaNoWriMo last year, I had a similar sort of feeling where even though I had the word count, it felt kind of not great and also nowhere near what it needed to be, and I wasn't particularly proud of it. all this kind of stuff. This is why I cut so much out. I think we have said earlier on in this series, but in total, this is something I've been working on for about a year.
Yeah.
And I've cut away about 35,000 words, 40,000 words, because it's just, which means that I basically threw away last NaNoWriMo.
Say if I did that, I wouldn't have a book.
But my point is that I understand it. But
Yeah.
the important thing is, right now that you've completed the challenge, you've written the longest thing you've ever written, and it's really, really close to a full first draft. That you're like, it doesn't matter how good it is, you're really close to a full first draft. So you're in a better position than I was, because I was nowhere near a full first draft.
You should have done what I did and written a simple book for simple people. By a simple
You
person.
have not written a simple book. That is total bollocks. You've written a really complex narratorial adventure.
Listen, simple is different for different people. Some of us always have multiple voices in our head, Ben.
Oh.
It's we've got to talk about sprints.
Sprints, yes.
We got to a point where ourselves and he's getting a shout out. Scott, who's one of our Patreons, we're doing multiple half-hour sprints a day. Sprints, just in case you don't know, listener, you set a timer, everyone joins. You can do this. There are Discord bots for it. People do it through Twitter. There are bots for it on the Nano website. But you write for that time. You put in how many words you wrote in that time, and you get a little table to say what your words per minute are. We all became obsessive with these bloody things over the course of about 8 days.
Yeah, they happened quite a lot. We have a Discord space that we dedicated to it as like a support for the people that were doing it with us. And yeah, it got a bit intense. You'd have people being like, "In on about for a sprint, let's do it." Yeah. And then in half an hour, if you are just writing and you've got the time pressure, you can write. I mean, I think the general spread was anywhere between about 800 and 1,500 words.
Yeah.
Which is most of a daily word count in half an hour. So it's excellent for wringing words out of you. Anyone can have words just pulled out of them by doing a sprint, I think.
I mean, a table that gives you positions based on your speed is guaranteed for at least the two of us to make stuff happen.
Words per minute and all that stuff, yeah. Yeah, it was pretty intense. I wonder whether the possible overuse of those sprints might be also one of the reasons that you're feeling a bit burnt out.
Probably.
Aside from the fact that we both finished very early in this, we basically finished a week early. A lot of the words that were happening in the build-up to that crossing the finishing line were being done in those sprints in short, very aggressive bursts of writing.
Yeah.
And I found that I was not particularly proud of the words that were coming out of those 30-minute sections. I think they're very useful, especially if you have got only half an hour to write every day.
Yeah.
Which I feel like, a lot of people would be able to do that. Carve half an hour out somewhere. You can do that for a month.
Like I was saying just a bit earlier in the record, that I feel like I've dropped the ball and all of a sudden stopped writing. I think things like not doing a sprint are part of that, because then you say to yourself, "Oh, it's only half an hour. I can fit that in. I can do that." Mm-hmm. Whereas if I say I should sit down and write, oh well, it's it's nearly 5 now, and I'm gonna have to make dinner, and then you just don't do it. It's bizarre.
Well, yeah, I think for me, one of the things that NaNoWriMo is trying to do, which I enjoy about it, is that it's trying to build a habit, because you do it for
yes.
But this is why I feel like sprints are a bit of a double-edged sword, because you kind of don't want to get into the habit of blasting words out of yourself.
Yeah.
Like it's like it's like fishing with dynamite.
Yeah.
And that's it. Whilst it feels good if you're racing towards a word count, if you're doing the slightly more kind of like amorphous, I am writing a book today, it doesn't work as well. So I was finding towards the end of those sprints that I didn't, I wasn't enjoying it as much, what was coming out in the creative process,
Yeah.
because I feel like I'll like, type a few sentences, have a think, and then I'll type a few more sentences. That doesn't work in a sprint because you don't have time to think.
Yeah.
And I enjoy the act of creation. That like the oh, wouldn't that be cool? Oh, that's a cool. Here's let's try this sort of thing. Um, so I think it's useful if you are behind a deadline,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't include it in my regular process.
I can
I
see that.
I think some version of it, like saying today, if you were full time writer and all the rest of it, you'd be like, I'm gonna sit down for 3 hours this morning and I'm gonna write a word target. I'm gonna write 1,000 words, which I think is what Stephen King says that people should write if they're gonna try it. If they're gonna be authors,
Yeah.
a thousand words a day. But we were writing, between 2,000 and 5,000 words fairly regularly, which
Yeah.
is slightly too many. I was finding the burnout was on the horizon every time I did that.
That 5,500 word day, I
Yes.
felt like I was wrung completely dry.
Yeah, emptiness.
That I joked about it with you. I said, "Oh, I'm only about 50 words behind you," and
Yes.
I legitimately could not have written the 51 words required to overtake you. Like I just didn't have it in me. It was, but I don't know the name of the author, so you may have to remind me. But there was an author we saw who'd on the 20th had written 100,000 words, which is 5,000 a day every day. Which
110,000. Yeah,
was it 110? Oh, good God!
I have unfortunately forgotten her name.
That is a lot of words.
It's a huge. I would say that's. I don't like. If she might be able to write those amount of words and it be all fine and them be useful words to her. But if I did that, I would burn out really quickly and not enjoy what I was doing.
Mine
So
would
all
be
yeah,
absolute shit. Let's not dance around that. It would be dreadful.
but all props. Yeah, maybe it's like any muscle. The more you work it out, the more you can go. But it seems like a lot to write regularly. This is what I'm saying. Like you want to build the habit,
Yeah.
and I don't want that habit. I would much prefer to be able to write 1,000 or 1,000+ words a day on any project that I was working on,
Yeah.
and feel sated by it. That act of creation, and feel good about what I wrote, because I think that helps. Enjoying what you're doing and being proud of what you're doing is necessary for good mental health in anything that you're doing. Whether
Yeah.
whether it is your hobby or your job or whatever, like it's so important to be okay and to be proud of yourself, especially with something like this where it's so creative. Because a whole bunch of times during the NaNoWriMo when I felt burnt out, I've just felt like almost crushed by the weight of my own expectations.
Yeah.
And it's that stuff isn't fun. And we've spoken to loads of authors on the bookcase about the self-doubt and getting their own way, and everybody has their own versions of it. So you've got to do what you need to do to get through it. And for me, sprints is not how to do it.
Yeah.
Writing 5,500 words every day is not how to do it. It's too
I
much.
Do you know, I think this is a really bizarre thing, but I changed where I was writing in the flat.
Okay.
So at first I would sit down and I would write in. We've got a room with all the bookcases in, and it's kind of like the games room. It's
Sure.
bookcases and miniatures and board games, and
It's a fun room.
and I love the room. I'm in it right now, but I would find myself looking over my shoulder at my shelves full of Pratchett books and at my Douglas Adams books,
Yeah.
and immediately thinking, "You're just aping these people. You're aping your heroes. You're not doing a good job." I thought, what the fuck am I doing that to myself for?
It's pretty savage.
What a dreadful thing to do! It's like joining a pickup game of basketball and putting up a picture of Michael Jordan on your phone, being like, "Well, I'll never be as good as you." Wee.
I have a I have a map of Eriador above my computer screen that I write at.
Yeah.
And just occasionally, when I'm feeling bad about myself, I'll lean back in my chair and just look up at all the place names and all this like wonderful world building that Tolkien did,
Yeah.
and just think, oh, this is just
I mean, I'm looking directly at a map of Middle Earth right now. I think
yeah.
we've discussed that before.
Yeah.
Oh
I was just
no.
thinking about your previous setup. This is a bit off topic, but when we
Yeah.
first started and you were in your old flat, there's a bunch of pictures that you took um, of like the basically like pillow fort you built around yourself to get some element of soundproofing in.
Yes. Yeah.
That was, I mean, you've come a long way from that to writing in a wonderfully decorated study, haven't you?
Yes. See, this is growth, people. Something's growing on me. So,
Yes.
in terms of where your work is now, like what is it? What have we got? What?
So I've been editing since I finished. So on the 24th,
Yeah.
I've been editing, but rather than necessarily increasing word count or anything, which was very much the mindset for the NaNoWriMo, it is just getting down into the weeds of the turns of phrase and how the story is structured. Because I now have a full first draft, so
Yeah.
but it feels a little bit skeletal in places. So I've been doing stuff like chapter word count breakdowns and trying to find where the storytelling is thin on the ground and
Yes.
plump it up somewhat. Um, but I definitely did feel very kind of. I had a day off after I finished,
Yeah.
and even one day off was really hard to come back from the next day. I think overall my word count increased by 53 words 2 days afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, but that's where it's at. I'm going to edit this big son of a bitch for about a month,
Yeah.
and then see what I've got at the end of that, and then possibly if it's in a state where I think it should be read by people, I'll start sending it around to people to get their thoughts, and then a bit of a sort of like a test audience and get some
Me,
feedback
sir.
from
Me,
people.
sir.
Exactly, yeah. And then do another round of edits, and then it'll be trying to publish the fucking thing.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so far out of my realm of expertise. The publishing thing. Kath asked me the other day, my partner, so how do you get a book published? And I stared into the middle distance for about 30 seconds and went, I don't fucking know.
Oh well, the chances of it like being traditionally published are very, very slim. I think it's it's a difficult thing to do,
Yeah.
and very few people make money from doing this kind of thing. But in self-publishing, we've done that with
We have.
the first season of short stories from this tiny bookcase. So stuff like that is, whilst all the promotion then falls upon you, it still can work.
Yes. It's achievable.
Achievable, yeah, totally. So I don't think it's beyond the realms. Whatever the final thing is, final form of these books that we've written are, it's coming, and we've done a big part of it, which is to get. So in my case, a first draft, and you're very close to a first draft. Like I think you'd definitely be doing your book a disservice if you didn't get this last 10,000 words out of you that you want. If it's necessary for the book, before you start editing, you need to do it, because
it needs an ending.
it needs an ending, and it needs to happen, because everything we've seen of your book on this podcast and myself outside of it as well, I need that to exist. It needs to happen, because you're not aping Pratchett or Douglas Adams, even though that's a lot of my my feedback is like, oh, that reminds me of that's fine.
Yeah.
Those are great people to sound like.
Yes.
It needs to be finished.
I think it's the case for both of us. What's been really nice about this is, even though we're both writing, in inverted commas, fantasy books, we're both writing things that are so different that when we get these opportunities to glimpse into each other's works in progress, it's such a change from... Because I haven't really read anything over the course of Nano either.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
I normally read on the bus. when I'm going to and from work, I'll pop my Kindle out and I'll have a bit of a read. And I thought I don't want to read any fantasy stories because I don't want to start lifting things by accident because they're in my head. And I don't want to read any Pratchett because I don't want to steal any jokes directly. And all of a sudden I thought I don't know what I can read. Don't like anything else. But it's ended up with me going back to mostly audiobooks and podcasts,
Right.
and listening to people talk about their real lives, because it's so far removed from what I'm writing that it means I can sort of get in and out of that world building headspace.
Okay, I can kind of understand it. But I think different approaches work for different people. I mean,
Yes.
we've already, the episode that's coming out after this one, so when we're back to a more sort of like normal output, is with David Geimer. Bit of a sneak preview for 2 weeks' time, and he does talk about the novels that he reads whilst he's writing novels,
Yes.
and I can get behind that. You know, filling your world with your creative space with the masters of the craft seems like a wise idea.
Yeah.
Alternately, reading something completely opposite is also kind of cool, because then you feel like you're treading new ground every time you sit down to write, perhaps.
Yes.
But in either case, the it just has to be whatever works for you. But I think
Yeah.
not reading at all is not. I think you should, you love reading, you should carry on reading, and you shouldn't feel afraid that you might steal or anything like that, because that's just not going to happen. You are your own person when you sit down to write.
I mean, there was a Pokemon game came out, so that did take a bit of time.
There we go.
What about? What's that over there?
You fell into a game hole and managed to complete NaNoWriMo. That's quite
Listen,
impressive.
listen here. Yes, I did. I would do it again.
Hell yeah, I'd do this again.
I mean, might have to. Might need to write number 2.
Yeah, number 2, eh? Yeah, and also, what I would say, if anyone is listening, this year we did it, and interested, I mean, in doing this. This year we did it with some of our Patreon backers, and if anybody wants to do it again next year and be a part of a bit of a community and support group where we discuss word counts and what we want to achieve with stuff, do get in touch with us, because I think that was a very positive experience for me this year.
Yeah.
Fairly low energy, and just we're all doing this big goal together. It felt good. So if anybody wants to be a part of that, just give us a shout and we'll do it for 2022.
Yeah, just great to see words coming out of people who don't write all of the time. We've normalized writing because we make this podcast, and it means we're always writing something.
Yeah.
But people who aren't, I mean, now they are writers because bloody hell, they've just spent a month writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
But people who aren't always writing, sitting down and making that happen. I am proud of every single one of you. Anyone who's listening, who even attempted NaNoWriMo, well done. It is a hard thing to do, and it's a scary thing to do. And it comes up all the time on the podcast, but everyone has a book in them, apparently. So well done for trying to get yours out. It must be very painful.
It makes me so incandescently angry when I encounter people mystifying writing.
Yeah.
And putting themselves above others because they have
written something. Yeah.
They've written something, or they've been a writer for longer, or they've had more success. That would be a problem in any field, but in this one, storytelling is such a fundamental part of the human experience for me, and I think that is true for everybody else as well on some level, whether it's watching soaps or reading your favorite fantasy novels. It doesn't matter. It's important to people, and people like telling stories, and this is one of the ways that we as a civilization have chosen to express that. So anyone can do this. Anyone can have a go at doing this. If you don't like it, fuck it, don't do it. But there needs to be that open space where people can be like, you can try this.
I think a big thing, and it's a problem a lot of the time, is that we've built a society where if you're doing something, it should be because you're absolutely brilliant at it or because you can sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that. So I'm a singer, and a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I can't sing." Everyone can sing. You might not be able to sing well. You might not sing in tune, but it still feels good when a song comes on and you absolutely belt along with it because it feels good to sing. And in the same way that everyone should draw, you don't need to be able to draw well. Just draw because it feels good to create. Cook badly, and cook badly until you can cook well. It's just how things work, and it's very sad that a lot of people think, well, I can't write a book, so I'm not going to write. Of course, you can't write a book with that attitude. Write things down, and the more you write down, the easier you'll find it to write things down, and just normalize doing creative things for the sake of doing them. Not everything that you make has to even be made public. Just trust us, do it. Do it and you will be so happy. When did this episode get wholesome?
I don't know. But it feels like we're sort of approaching the end of talking about NaNoWriMo, really. Like, we are going to be going back to talking about short stories with guests and interviewing authors very soon. This has been 4 episodes that we've put together, and we've very much put it together during November. Like as you've heard from each of them, we'll be like, okay, it's day 4 or whatever. So hopefully it's been an interesting experience for you, and we've really liked the idea that we're going to get to come and talk to you about our experiences with NaNoWriMo 2021. We've both, as we've said, completed the challenge a little bit early, which is fun. But there's nothing wrong with completing it on the final day or final hour or whatever. But we just happen to have done that because of our own personalities and the time that we had free and that whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's all done. It's all been pulled together, and hopefully we'll keep you updated on what we do with the rest of this. What we do with these books when they come out and in what form they take shape in, and it's all very exciting, and we hope you're excited about it as well.
We go to bed.
It sounded like an invitation.
It was. Yes, I see you finished NaNoWriMo, my friend. Where's that wizard?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For rich ginger tones on the scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?